The improvisation assessment profiles were developed by a music therapist named Kenneth Bruscia, and they're outlined in his book, Improvisational Models of Music Therapy, 1987. I'm going to be referring in this talk to my book called The Way of Music, Creating Sound Connections in Music Therapy. And the reason I wanted to make this talk is because I know a lot of you are interested in the power of music to inform, to change, to help, people develop. And as a music therapist and music facilitator, one of the things that I try to do in my group music making experiences is I try to assess what people's needs are, what their states could be, what their mood could be, what their thinking could be, all these kinds of different aspects, excuse me, that are folded into the music making experience. So in this talk, I'm going to be just covering a little bit about this assessment profile so you can start to become familiar with it. We're going to dig in a little, but what this basically is an assessment tool. They're called profiles because there's several categories in other words, several lenses that we can look through when we're looking at how somebody is making music and how they're interacting with not only the music they're making, but with the other group members, and et cetera, et cetera. So together they form, a cohesive sort of a constellation of aspects or views through which we can look at an individual and then better serve them, better help them. So improvisation assessment profiles, or the IAPs. I know the text is small, but let's walk through it, and I'm going to vanish from your view for a second so I can put on my reading glasses and see what we're looking at. So basically, the individual improvisation assessment profiles help you answer the questions: how do I categorize and label those indicators in a way that is both effective and manageable? How can I use the information I gather to inform my in-the-moment experience? And how can I use the information I gather to inform ongoing clinical practice with clients? And to be clear, I realize that some of you are not music therapists. Probably most of you watching this are not music therapists. But if you're an educator, or you're a music facilitator, or you're just curious about some of the ways that we as people, as creators, as artists, as expressive people, interact and express ourselves within a musical context, and how those interactions can inform you, period, then you're in the right place. You don't have to be a music therapist to use this information. Okay, let's look at the first category, and like I said, I'm going to put these glasses on so I can see. But this will give you an idea of how this is organized. So the first category is salience, and salience is basically, when we talk about salience, we're just talking about what is most noticeable in the music that somebody is playing. So in this profile, every one of these profiles, Kenneth Bruscia has outlined at least five terms, and those are not as important as just understanding the main concept. So the main concept is what is not noticeable or hardly noticeable in the music, and then what is, he uses the word overpowering or overbearing, what is extremely noticeable. All right, so in that regard, salience just means what stands out, right? What is standing out in the music that somebody is playing. All right, that's basically it. What is the main feature? Is it a rhythmic thing? Is it the sound? Is it the volume? All right, so we're going to cover these pretty quick. There's a lot more in the book here for you to consider, but we're just going to familiarize ourselves with the IAPs for right now. The second category here is integration. And in that regard, we're going to ask ourselves the question, to what degree does the music that somebody's playing fit together with the music of the rest of the group, or even within a person's own music making? And so he talks about gradients. Yeah, that's what he uses. He uses the term gradients to describe different spots on this continuum. The left side is undifferentiated, which we can think of as completely blended in with the music. So it's not really, it's fully integrated over here. And then we go to fused, integrated, differentiated, so slightly different, and then over differentiated, meaning like it's really not fitting at all with the music. So integration is the music that somebody is playing. And to be fair, we're talking about behaviors right now. So even if it's not necessarily the music making, it could be other aspects besides just the music, and we'll get to that in a second. But is it integrated? Is it fitting with, or is it overfitting? In other words, is it just blending in completely, or is it not blending in at all? All right, then we move on to variability, and this category here is about what happens over time, right? So this is more of a dynamic category. Variability, on the left side, we have no change, or what he calls rigidity, right? So is the music that somebody's playing unchanging over time? Is it rigid? Are they stuck in one thing? And you'll notice if you're, as you work with groups or you play with other people, you might notice that sometimes people will get something going and then they just never change it, no matter what happens around them. So they're really, maybe that's an indicator, for example, of them being in their own little bubble, not listening, not paying attention to what's around them. For example, we don't know that for sure, but that could point in that direction. And then we have stable, variable in the middle, and then contrasting, and then random is on the right side of this. So we're going from no change to constant change. Sometimes people just never settle on anything, and so it's hard to even ascertain like what is the thing that they're playing, because they never really settle on anything, right? Constant change. And you might notice that too, that sometimes people just seem to be constantly experimenting, and there's nothing wrong with that. This isn't about judging, it's not about putting a value judgment on a certain behavior. It's just about noticing the behavior and and describing it within a context, right? That's all. So we're saying, in this case, if we have constant change, we're saying it's changing constantly within the player's music, and it's also changing constantly with regard to the background or the group music. All right, another category, moving on, is tension. Tension, for gradients for tension, we have what he calls hypotense or no tension, meaning that things are going to be completely congruent, blended in. Again, and this is a musical call. This isn't about variability. Variability, we could have things blending in because there's no variation at all. No tension would just be, for example, if we're playing to a beat, that they're just playing exactly on the pulse, and that's it. There's no tension at all. And then we've got calm, cyclic, tense, and then hypertense, meaning pure tension, which means perhaps that nothing is aligning. Like if it's a melodic piece of music, it's never in the key, right? It's just always outside of the key of the music, or it's always outside of the rhythm, even the pulse. It's just not relating to the music at all, thereby creating a lot of tension. Now, of course, when we talk about tension, this is a little subjective, but even, musically speaking, even objectively, we could say that something that is never aligning with the pulse is probably creating tension, right? I think that's fair to say. All right, the next category starts down here, and we're calling that congruence or congruence. Congruence, just simply meaning is okay. So this one actually is different in as much as we're going to talk about the person and their body language, affect, what they say about the music. This is different than tension. Tension and variability are relating to musical qualities. When we talk about congruence, we're talking about, is the person's affect, in other words, how they appear, their body language, their gestures, and their words to describe what they're doing, are those congruent with the music they're making? So, for example, if somebody is playing, if their playing is matching the music, and it's somewhat variable, and it seems to be appropriate for the setting, and they're smiling, and they're moving around, and they're looking around, making eye contact with people, and then they say that they had a great time or they're having fun, we would say that's congruent, right? If they are doing the same behaviors, if they're playing along, their music is integrated, they're smiling, they're making eye contact, they're looking around, and then they say that they absolutely had a terrible time and they hated it. All right, that would be incongruent with their, it would be incongruent, right? It doesn't match. So congruency, and we're going to look at what we have in the gradient here. We've got non-engaged or uncommitted. This is gradients for congruence. And then congruent, centered, incongruent, and polarized, contradictory over here. So, like I just talked about, and we're talking about affect, or you could think of facial expression, like emotional expression, body language, gestures, and what people say about it, about the experience. Does it match? Is it all congruent, or is it not? Is it, in this case, he uses the word polarized. I would say contradictory would be a good term. All right, so does that make sense? Hopefully it does. All right, the last category that we're looking at in here is autonomy. And autonomy basically means, to what degree is the person impacted or affected or influenced by what's happening around them. So let's look at the gradients for autonomy are on the left side, or the beginning, the least autonomous would be dependent. They're completely dependent on others. And then we go to follower, partner, leader, and resistor. So not influenced by others, right? So at one end, completely influenced. And maybe you've noticed this, or you felt this in yourself. What I've noticed, or I will notice sometimes, is when I'm working with a group of people, I could imagine, again, and we're not sure exactly what's happening inside somebody when we use the IAPs. We're just noticing behaviors, and then we can start to form a theory or opinion, or a hunch, a guess as to what might be going on with someone over time. These are not things we're going to use in the moment to reach a conclusion, but they point in certain directions. So if I notice somebody, for example, who is playing, but they always play what other people play, and they follow. So if they wait for people to play, and then they join in, and they kind of play what those people are playing, and then if those people change, then they play what those people play, and they just follow, and they don't really show autonomy. That would be at the left side of the scale. If, on the other hand, somebody starts playing before everyone else, and then maybe everybody's playing a certain rhythm or certain beat or at a certain volume, and that person is just doing their own thing, they're not matching, they're not integrating with everyone else, then there's just no connection. Now, we could say that they're super autonomous, but in this case, Bruscia uses the word resistor, and that's a pretty extreme degree. because we could also say that, for example, let's say, and we do this in music therapy, let's say that I start playing and somebody else starts playing, but what they're playing has nothing to do with what I'm doing. They're just doing their own thing. But then I move over to what they're doing, right? I change what I'm doing and I follow them, right? So now we're together, but then they change and they move away. So that would indicate a resistance to integration, right? But it would also indicate that they are purposefully not playing, with others, right? They're resisting that. They're resisting joining the group, all right? So autonomy is one thing, but then being ultra autonomous or resisting, going beyond being a leader, that's another thing. Now, again, why people do what they do is another question, and we don't know, and we don't want to jump to conclusions. But let's just end with this part, and this is called Finding Balance in the IAPs. So I'm going to read this just in case you can't read it. So if we take all the center terms from each profile, ones that indicate what we generally describe as functional relationships, we see that the participants' musical efforts are contributing to the overall effect, integrated into other elements, variable and changing over time, creating periods of tension and release that are cyclic, centered in people's affect and body language, and showing that a partnership exists. Okay? Now, I think now that we've gone through the IAPs, and again, this is from this book, The Way of Music, Creating Sound Connections in Music Therapy. We can see, I hope you can get a picture now of, or an idea of how you could assess or view or perceive of what could be going on with somebody in a group music setting. And again, this is aimed towards improvisation. He calls these improvisation profiles. And I think it's fair because within an improvisation, you're going to have more opportunity, for example, for variability, for following, for making choices, right? Whereas with recreating music in an ensemble, it's not going to be clear if somebody's making an autonomous choice because they really can't, right? They've got a part to play, they've practiced it, they've rehearsed it, they're fulfilling a certain role. And in an improv, those rules don't apply, right? We don't have those kinds of restraints and commitments to conformity in improvisation that we do in a situation where we're trying to either compose music or certainly recreate music. So that's why these are improvisation profiles. So let me just go back and remind you of what the categories are. I need to find them again real quick. But I don't know, what do you guys think of these? I think it's kind of useful. I messaged Kenneth Bruscia about all the terms also. And I said, would you do anything different if you had to redo these, if you had to rewrite these? And he said, yeah, I probably wouldn't label every single gradient because that's a lot of gradients. And he said, I'd probably just say, okay, this is salience, right? The first one is salience, and it just means what stands out. And so you just have to know nothing stands out over here. A lot of things are standing out over here. It's overpowering. So this goes from, receding to overpowering. Don't worry about all the labels in the middle. You don't have to remember all that. But contributing would be in the middle. So you just want to maybe have the person's music is contributing, but it's not nothing, and it's not overpowering. All right. And then second one, integration. Is it integrated? Again, down here, it's completely blended. And then here, nothing fits. So completely blended, nothing fits. Don't worry about all the words, all the different terms. You can look at this, but you don't have to remember all those different terms. It's just, is it integrating or is it not integrating? And then variability. Is it varying, or is it rigid, or is it random, right? Rigid or random, or variable in the middle, right? And then tension. Cyclic, meaning, yeah, there's some tension, but it's not all tension. It's not over here. It's not hypertense. And it's not no tension. It's not hypotense. All right, so cyclic, tension, and then congruence or congruence. We had, then again, this is more about what the person, how the person's behavior is either congruent or not congruent with their music. So, uncommitted he has down here, but in the middle he's got centered, and then polarized or contradictory over on the right side. So uncommitted, I'm not sure what he actually means by that, but then he's got congruent here, and then centered, and then incongruent. So yeah, this one though, is just about, again, does their affect, body language, gestures, and what they say about the music they're making and the experience match the the music that they made. And then autonomy is how does their music relate to others? Are they completely dependent, or are they resisting, or are they functioning as a partner? And then here we have follower and leader. I think this makes the most sense to me. And then finally, when we're going to use these, and this is what I'm just going to repeat, kind of what Bruscia recommends when using this IAP as an overall assessment model, that it's really necessary to have several experiences with a person, and observe them in different settings and over different days, different times, maybe with different groups or whatever it is. So this is not a one and done kind of thing. Certainly it's fine to practice noticing these things in the moment. Like you could just notice, oh, that person's music seems to be rigid in, at least in this moment, or they're not showing any autonomy right now, or they're showing, resistance to what's happening in the group. It's fine to notice those things, but it's important to not jump to conclusions, because we just don't know why somebody might be, for example, their music might seem rigid, or they might seem like they're resisting, but it may not be purposeful. It may not be a conscious decision. Like they might just be spacing out and in their own little bubble, and the music changes and they don't change with it. That doesn't mean they're resisting, right? It just means that that's just what seems to be happening, that their music's not matching what's happening. If, like I said earlier, if we change, like somebody's playing something different and then we change and we match them, and then they move away, and then we match them and they move away, and we, then it might give us more reason to believe that they actually are resisting playing with others. But the bottom line is we just don't know until we gather a lot of information over time. But I think these, I think the IAPs are interesting, and it's worth looking into and worth exploring. But at the end of the day, too, you guys, you need to do this work for yourself, and that means playing music with people and observing and putting on different kinds of lenses, looking through these different lenses, so you can start to develop your own skills in assessment, in using this kind of tool. Yeah, because it's just a way of observing things. All right, what do you guys think? Yeah, So I'll put this out to you guys. If you want to know more about those, you can look at Kenneth Bruce's book, or even my book, The Way of Music, Creating Sound Connections in Music Therapy. If you have anything else you want to add, put it down below. If you have a message for me, want to contact me, do that through patreon.com/Kalani. Thanks for watching. Go make some great music. See you guys later.